All right. Let me now welcome on a very special guest, former Gophers basketball player and now head of marketing at PlayersTV, Kendal Shell. How are we doing today, man?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. I guess we'll start all the way back at the start of your Gophers basketball career. You obviously grew up in St. Louis, and I guess I always love recruiting stories and how people ended up at certain areas. And obviously, St. Louis to Minnesota, not that clear of a connection. So I guess all the way back to your high school days, how was your recruiting like out of high school, and how did you ultimately end up at Minnesota?
Yeah, for sure. So it was interesting. My recruiting out of high school was a lot of mid-major D1, I would say, and then a ton of D2, a lot of low major, D3, a lot of those schools. Missouri Valley Conference probably recruited me the heaviest of all conferences, which makes sense. I mean, being in St. Louis, so a lot of those surrounding schools. And quite honestly, I was really looking to go out somewhere west because both of my older brothers lived out west. And so I took, some visits out there, Loyola Marymount, Pepperdine, took an unofficial to USC just because I loved USC during that time. And, I just liked the West Coast, and I actually was committed to go to Pepperdine. So Pepperdine was my original choice. I mean, during my grad party in high school, I had Pepperdine like on all the banners. Like that's where I was supposed to go. That was it. I was ready. Like Malibu's most wanted, but like without the most wanted, I was ready to do it. And I guess it was like probably a week after that grad party. And yeah, about a week after that grad party, Coach Tubby Smith, I think ran into, one of my coaches, I think it was, one of my old coaches, and just, asked how I was doing and just talked about like, hey, there, we loved Kendal, but there's not any scholarships at the time, but there's always a spot, for him on our roster. I think there's a chance of him getting a scholarship at some point, but he wanted to be clear that there wasn't any scholarships at the time. And during that time, when that was brought up to me, I think I'm not really sure why I even entertained it because I was just so set on like, getting a scholarship, going somewhere. Like the idea of what Tubby framed it as a preferred walk-on didn't make sense to me. But something about, Tubby and like just the way he was talking, the way my family was listening, it's like something about his voice, right? You got to respect him. You got to respect Tubby Smith. And so we had a phone call with him, talked about that preferred walk-on meant. He said, come on the campus, let's show you around, let's talk through it a little bit more. And I got in the car the next morning, went up to Minneapolis, drove up there with my parents, and I loved it. Honestly, I loved everything Tubby had to say. I think I saw Trevor Mbakwe and Rodney Williams on my visit during the time. Both of them were cool. And I think I really liked the aspect of like the college campus felt more like a college, if that makes sense. Pepperdine is a beautiful school, but it's in the middle of Malibu, right? You're right on the Pacific Coast Highway. A little different than that ideal college, thought that I think most guys have, especially myself during the time. And so I thought it through. I knew it'd be a lot tougher, to get playing time in Minnesota, but ultimately I understood like one, I'm ready to battle. I love battling. And two, it was the bigger picture for me. Literally like the Big Ten just felt like a bigger opportunity for me. Felt like better basketball in my opinion. I want that college experience, right? Having the football team there as well. And so ultimately on that visit, I let Coach Smith know. I think I was driving back home to St. Louis, and I just called him and said, "Hey, Coach, I'm ready to, go to the University of Minnesota. What I need to do." And he said, "Well, the guys are reporting next Monday," and I just wasn't prepared for that because it was like Thursday, and he was like, "Yeah, for summer school, like we gotta get you ramped up and rolled really quickly here, and get approved. Like I'll have someone call you within the next couple hours." And so then after that, we got ramped up, got enrolled quick. And then we were able to make it happen. So I reported about 4 days later, moved up to Minneapolis. Hadn't really been in Minneapolis much before. I think maybe once for like a high school tournament. But really it was time. It was just like, hey, Pepperdine, I love it. It was great. But Minnesota felt like the place to be. And Tubby was really the ultimate reason. He was just a great guy to be around. So I ended up at the University of Minnesota.
Yeah. I Malibu compared to Twin Cities, obviously a massive difference, but I kind of agree with you that the University of Minnesota, what's so unique compared to other schools is they do such a good job separating almost the Minneapolis, St. Paul area to the actual campus. It's almost like its own city in itself. And
For
I
sure.
think that's what makes it so unique compared to other schools.
No, I completely agree, man. I completely agree. And it was close enough to the city too, right? And it was like the airport was close enough too. It
Yeah.
just, I don't know. It's the University of Minnesota is an unbelievable, proximity, the
Mhm.
location, what it is, what they have to offer, and just the Twin Cities in general.
Yeah. So obviously you start your career as a preferred walk-on. Something I think that's becoming more and more common and accepted in college athletics. What was, I guess, the toughest struggle as that with that, not knowing, I guess, you have the security of a scholarship. You ultimately want to work to that point. Kind of, I guess, for someone that obviously wouldn't know as a someone who played as a preferred walk-on, kind of how was that whole experience for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think, you got to understand and be self-aware that there are recruits that were given scholarships and there's a lot of money behind these recruits, and so it's you're already kind of up against something right there. And so just having the right people around me, letting me know that already, I think that just kind of kept me, level minded, like, hey, this is going to be a grind. Like when I feel like he's just getting a shot, but I should be getting a shot, like there's more to it. Like I signed up for this essentially. And so I say the toughest part of the just that tenure when I was still a preferred walk on was, I guess, the beginning. Before, like, I met anyone, right? I didn't have that big recruiting visit where a lot of guys were on campus and they knew I was coming. I did have all the articles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months in advance, right? I didn't have that national college signing day. Two of my best friends to this day, Joe Coleman, Andre Hollins, they were the other two in my class during that time as freshmen. And, I mean, top 100 recruits during the time. They
Yeah.
were able to get a lot of attention from the news, the media. So I think it was more of a understanding and also just trying to be like, hey, I'm here, right? And I'm not naturally, somebody that's gonna just talk and speak my way in anything. I like to let my game speak for itself. And so for about the first week or so before we had workouts or open gym or anything, it was just kind of like I was staying back and waiting. But as I started to play and started to, get used to the guys, I think, it started to become easy. Like I'm going to talk to anybody. And I love the game of basketball, right? Like once you roll the ball out, it doesn't matter. But it was just getting through that psychology of understanding that you can't think of yourself as a preferred walk on. And like it took me about like that summer to start to really feel that. By the end of that summer, I wasn't thinking like that anymore. Like going into the school year, like it was different, right? As I was, lifting weights, right? I was like, hey, if I'm not going to play right away, let me be one of the strongest guys on this team. I don't care what position I am. I don't care what year I am, right? So like eventually I started lifting with Trevor Bachway and Chip Armlin like freshman year, like just like going hard at certain things and just being like, yo, if I'm gonna like if I think of myself as a preferred walk on, everybody else will. And like it got to a point where like I think about halfway through my freshman year, it was almost like most thought I was a scholarship player. And luckily eventually I was.
Yeah, that's a super interesting perspective because really for any, I guess, college student, especially a student athlete, it's such a big change, I think, from high school, especially when you're going to the big city.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to adjust. And it's so much that you don't know what to expect. And then you really don't know until you're in the mix. And it's interesting to hear that it happened that quickly. Cause for some people, I'd imagine it takes at least a whole year.
Yeah, for sure. I think, when Coach Pitino ended up coming, he had like walk-on tryouts, right? And so we were able to have a couple come on during that time. And it was almost like, me being in that position before kind of take them under my wing, right? And it is hard. It is hard for most. It is hard to kind of get out of that shell and to figure it out. I think the guys on my team were really receptive too. I don't know. I mean, I think our energies just matched, and I think it just kind of fast tracked me to become a lot more comfortable, a lot faster. I think Coach Smith was very clear with me in our player meetings, like don't back down from anything. A lot of assistant coaches were the same way. Saul Smith during the time, Just like, hey, go out there and hoop, man. Like it doesn't matter. So yeah, I was just blessed for, I think, the people around me, as well as, going into it. I mean, I know like basketball in St. Louis is, you can play it anywhere. So I don't
Yeah.
care if, I'm going to Duke. Like it doesn't matter. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to compete. And that was my mindset.
Yeah, definitely. So then obviously the coach who recruited you, Coach Tubby Smith, gets let go about midway through your college career. It's always an interesting perspective, I guess, for the players in that situation, because all of you guys obviously got recruited by him, but you're still on the team when he leaves. So in that situation, when he was let go, did you guys kind of know that was happening, or what kind of was like the vibe around the team when that was going on?
Yeah, when Coach Smith got fired, no one saw it coming. It was
Hmm.
completely out of left field. It was the next morning after we got back from the NCAA tournament. We had probably outplayed what people thought we would, play as an NCAA tournament. We beat a 5 seed as a 12 seed. Something about that, about winning 20 wins, around the world, around the basketball world. It's just known as the job security is there. It's known, right? We won a tournament game. We weren't supposed to win that game. Got 20 plus wins. Obviously, we beat a number one team like Indiana that year. So there were high expectations, but also we did beat some great teams, and we had a great squad, a really good recruiting class coming in. So there was nothing that like showed us that Coach Smith was going to get fired. Not sure if anyone really completely agrees with it. I think there's obviously Minnesota fans who are always going to be pretty critical of the coaches, but I don't think anybody really saw that coming. And when it happened, myself, Otto Oceanix was in sales training class with, I think, Roy Gotti during the time, and he told us, because I think someone just messaged him, and we thought he was joking. And then it was like 15 minutes later, we got a text message from the office, lady, because the Coach Smith and all, he found out through the media. So he pretty much
Yeah.
found out when we found out. And then about 15 minutes later, we got a message, team meeting in an hour in the locker room. And we went in there and, he let us know business type stuff, let us know our goodbyes. It was like 5 minutes, quick, and just like that. I feel like everything was changed. Nobody really knew what was going on. We didn't have a coach for like 3 weeks. So we were supposed to get Shaka Smart. We were supposed to get like all these guys, didn't get them. It took forever. We were like, what's going on? We were just kind of in no man's land, like kind of playing open gym. Not really. Everybody's pretty much getting out of shape. And then we hear like the Pitino name. And first we were like, oh, Rick Pitino, what's going on? But then we realized who it was during that time. But we were all shocked. It was definitely an interesting experience for us.
Yeah, it was a weird time of Gophers basketball, because I mean, in my lifetime as a 21-year-old, that's only one of two tournament games that the Gophers have won that season. So, seeing that you have that successful of a year with the making the tournament, beating UCLA, beating Indiana during the year, it was just it seemed like the program was trending in the right direction, and it just seemed like such an interesting time to make that move. And I would imagine in the locker room, it had to just be a weird feeling, because there was so much talent on that team, and like you mentioned, so much talent coming in, and then just a bomb like that to get dropped, it had to be tough to process that.
It was definitely tough for everyone involved. And that's why I have sympathy for anyone who goes through a coaching change, and they might look to transfer, because there's a lot that goes on. And it's when you're recruited by someone, they sit in your living room, they talk to you, they talk to your parents, they get a lot of trust from the entire family. And so when like that person, in a lot of ways, keeping it real, that father figure for a lot
Yeah.
of teenagers is just taken away, it's almost like, what's going on. The natural reaction is to push back. And so you kind of almost got to get over that hump, see it through. And it's definitely a tough situation.
Yeah. I guess, how would you compare Coach Tubby Smith to Coach Pitino, their styles, I guess, and because I think they definitely were two different coaches, certainly. And from your perspective, how did that kind of play out as a player?
I think they were different styles. I think Coach Smith was more of a bruiser, old school Big Ten basketball. Coach,
Yeah.
came in as a fast-paced type coach. He wanted to implement a Louisville defense mixed with a Billy Donovan offense. two of his, coaching mentors. He coached on both of their staffs. I think ultimately, the way they ran the programs or just the overall aura, it wasn't that different. I mean, it'll be an obvious difference since one was 31 and one was, about to be 70. But, at the end of the day, like Coach Smith coached under Rick Pitino, Coach Pitino coached under Rick Pitino, the coaching tree there's ties, there's a lot of similarities the way, they interact with their staffs and just how that is. But ultimately gameplay wise, it was more of a fast-paced, type of play versus a half-court type high-low offense. We had a 4 and a 5 man with Coach Smith that was usually on the blocker in a high-low situation. We had with Coach Pitino was more of a stretch forward type positioning. I think they both had their great strengths. I loved Coach Smith and his ability just to speak to everyone within the program from a fatherly type perspective. You listen, and there's something about listening and about needing that authoritative figure for like young guys during that time.
Yeah, definitely.
Like it was cool to be able to interact with someone younger, right? I love Coach Pitino's offensive mind. Also, I think it was cool because I felt like he didn't really talk much offensively. I think we saw like that FS1, broadcast recently, Coach Pitino, and you saw like, obviously he's sarcastic, like literally during the games, during all times, but also he talked a lot on defense, but there wasn't a ton of talk on offense. He just kind of watches it play out. And so I think both just had their strengths in that. I think they're both great basketball minds. They come from basketball backgrounds, great pedigrees. And so I enjoyed both. I think they both had their pros and their cons. Ultimately, I didn't want Coach Smith to be let go, but ultimately I'm also thankful that I got to see two coaches that are high-level coaches and see how they both run programs, because now I only know the good and the good that I can bring together, and I'll see help others in the future.
Yeah, how would you, I guess, compare that NIT run the year after or Pitino's first year to the previous year when you guys obviously won a game in the NCAA tournament? Because the NIT obviously has a lot of it's the secondary tournament to the NCAA, but when you make a run like that, like you get to play extra basketball, you get to develop as a team. How would you compare that to the year before?
Yeah, I think it was. So, I mean, the interesting thing is we made it to the NIT my freshman year as well. And so my freshman year, we went there, we won the first game. I think it would be Stanford. Or I think that might have been it.
That sounds familiar.
It was like so long ago now. And then
Yeah.
we lost to Washington, or it might have been the other way around. I think we beat Washington and we lost to Stanford. But long story short, we went to the NIT. We went to New York freshman year. They were in that time. A lot of people thought we weren't going to make the tournament. We didn't, but it was a great season. Trevor and Bach ended up getting injured. A lot kind of went downhill after that, and so that was like a first experience, honestly, going through their postseason, and we ended up losing like at the end. And something about the NIT that we were able to take till that junior year as well. A lot of us that played that freshman year is you have to kind of create your own goals as a team. Like when you play in the NIT, everybody's goal is to make the NCAA tournament. If you're in the NIT, you probably had a realistic shot at some point during the season and make that NCAA tournament. So knowing that you're not making the NCAA tournament, how do you be able to turn it on to be like, hey, like this matters? And so that first game going into it in both NIT runs, like to be honest, it's kind of like, all right, here we go. You know what I mean? Who do you play? Like Southern Miss at your place or something? It's a home game. No one's really there. The fans are disappointed, but you're still playing. It takes about 5 minutes, and you're like, all right, whatever, let's win this thing. And that's literally what happened freshman year and junior year. Because at first it's hard to get up for, but once you roll the ball out, you're like, all right, let's win this, right? Like you win the first game, you're like, all right, we could win this. You win the second game, you're like, all right, we can go to Madison Square Garden, right? And that's kind of what the coaches do. They want to push you, like, hey, like you literally get to play in the Mecca, right? Like, let's get up for it. And so from a mindset standpoint, you do have to overcome that and play. But once you're there, like it's postseason basketball, like win or go home. There's not much better than that. I'll say the NIT was great because we won that thing junior year. We got to experience New York. We got to do it all. Like a picture of cutting down the nets, like that was unbelievable. It was a great experience. Like honestly, one of the best basketball experiences I've had because you get to travel around, you get to play at all these different schools, and it's fun. But like I'll be honest, like the NCAA tourney, like it just feels a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah.
We won it all in the NIT, but it's like NCAA tourney, you get to fly private still, right? You have to fly commercial. Like the NIT, you get to play at a neutral site. You have people betting on you across the country in tournament brackets. Like it just feels cool. There feels a lot more pressure. But both of them, they were good runs. I think in both seasons, we felt like we came off of a season of disappointment, to be honest. Like we were a 12 seed in the tourney. We thought we had no means, like there was no reason for us to be a 12 seed. We had the talent to be a 5, 6, 7 seed realistically. But we were a 12 seed and we felt like a little disappointment and like kind of like, hey, let's just new season. And that was the same mindset, I think, with the NIT. We're coming off an NCAA tournament season. We were hoping we could make another NCAA tournament, but made the NIT, and at the end of the day, we made the best of it and won that thing.
Yeah, I mean the NIT is interesting every year because you mentioned how it kind of starts out slow, and like I think the first round games are they're like the Monday, Tuesday of the first round of the NCAA tournament, and it's as a guy who watches like all the games, you're kind of like, oh shoot, like the NIT's on, and then you start watching it, and you almost get that kind of same feeling as the players that you're like, oh shoot, like I'm playing in the NIT, and then the games I think just progressively heat up more and more because everyone playing in those games are NCAA tournament caliber teams. It's just there's so many college basketball teams that not everyone can make the tournament, and like it's good basketball at the end of the day. And as a fan at the time, it was definitely interesting watching that run because I haven't seen much success at Gophers basketball, and winning all those games, it was fun to follow along for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think we were the number 1 seed. I think we might have been the number 2 seed my
Yeah.
freshman year, and then the number 1 seed in the NIT tournament my junior year. And it's like that's nice to hear, but also it's more heartbreaking because that just means you were the first and second team out of the NCAA tournament.
Exactly.
So it's whatever. But we came away with it.
Yeah. What would you say your favorite memory playing with the Gophers? What was it, that championship run in the NIT?
No, it's easy beating Indiana.
Yeah.
I mean, when you be a number 1 seed and you're not ranked and you have a court storming,
Yeah.
nothing beats that. Like, it was dope doing NCAA tourney. The NIT was unbelievable. I cut down the nets in Madison Square Garden, but beating Indiana when they were number 1, it feels great.
I think they were showing that when the Gophers played Indiana on Wednesday, and even you can just feel the energy, I think, through the clips on Twitter. That was definitely a cool moment.
Craziest game been around for sure.
Yeah, I would imagine. I guess now after your playing career, you've kind of went into more of a media and content creation career with the Players TV. And I guess for people that aren't following what you're up to, I guess what exactly are you up to, and where can Gophers fans follow you and support you?
Yeah, for sure. So like you said, I am the head of marketing and all content over at Players TV. So Players TV is an athlete-owned media network. Essentially, like if ESPN was owned by the athletes. So a ton of pro athletes where we work with on content creation, content production, and just a lot of brand marketing activations across their sports and across kind of their lifestyle interest. So that's really what I do the majority of the time now. I'm also just close to the game still. So very close just to the basketball game from a youth development standpoint. A lot of fans know I did a lot with Hoops and Christ during Minneapolis time. So, we worked with, Gophers during my time, actually. Like Andre Hollins was the guy that trained under Hoops and Christ, Daniel Oturu. We've had Amir Coffey, a part of Hoops and Christ training. We've had a lot of guys, Gabe Kalsher, a lot of those guys who went through the maroon and gold. And then also at Hoops and Beyond. And so essentially, I just like to work with student athletes to try and make for a better future for all athletes and all student athletes, and really help provide the blueprint I understand it's a tough day and age for athletes to really get through all the pressures of social media and their own personal issues and things like that. So just trying to be helpful in that nature, but working with athletes from a development standpoint, branding and all of that. And I think, both worlds collide. So specifically with basketball and then with Players TV, just with athletes in general from the pro sector and helping them from the business marketing side of stuff. But you can follow me. I'm across all socials, Kendal Shell on Instagram, and I think same thing on Twitter. So Kendal Shell on both channels. Yeah, try to be active and just try to be around the community. I'm based down in Dallas right now, and I'm often back and forth to Minneapolis. I'll probably be back, to Minneapolis soon here. But just around the area and heavily involved in the community. And I'm the alumni representative for the Booster Club. So just staying connected to the team and all the alumni, basketball alumni, as well as the Golden Dunkers boosters. Just figuring out new things, new ways to get Gopher basketball in the forefront of the community again. Because I felt like it was there, when I first came, when it was Tubby time, like it was hot.
Yeah.
It felt like it was hot. And I feel like, we need to figure out how to get it back to that time.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I had to be pretty young at this point, obviously, but I think I was in elementary or middle school, and there was a section championship game at our high school, hosted at our high school in Minnesota. And I remember Tubby came to the gym, and I forgot who he was watching exactly, but there was an aura when he came into the gym, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's Tubby Smith, that's Tubby Smith." And it just seemed like Gophers basketball at that point was it was in a very upward trajectory, I think. And like you mentioned, I think all people can hope for is to get back to that point. But now for you, as you've transitioned into a fan and still connected to the program, I guess where the program is right now with Ben Johnson, what would, I guess, be your way to how do you feel where the program is right now? And there's obviously a lot of people on Twitter having their opinions about everything, but how do you feel where the program is right now?
From a basketball and development and program building standpoint, I think we're in a good place. I think if I was athletic director right now, I'd feel we were in a good place. I think as an athletic director, you're competitive. I think as Ben Johnson, you're competitive. I think as all of us, we're competitive. So let's just state the obvious. We want to have a better record. We don't want to be in last place. But I'm not impatient. I've been around the game for a long time. I understand the ups and downs of college basketball, just of basketball in general, life in general. And it feels like a lot don't really have that patience around Minnesota sports, it seems to me, being here for about 10 to 12 years, but specifically Gopher sports and Gopher basketball. With Ben Johnson, he's in year 2. Unfortunately, like you just spoke about, I often see a lot calling for Ben Johnson's job on year 2. I think that's just lazy. I think Gopher fans there's some Gopher fans, not all Gopher fans, some that actually do call, him out, and I look into it and look for their reasoning. I see someone else replies. I never reply, never really talk through it. I just try to see reasonings, and it's lazy. It's usually lazy takes. It's only people that's looking at the score and they're looking at the record. They're not looking at the gameplay. They're not looking at all the outside factories of injuries. They're not looking at how many freshmen we have. They're not looking at the idea of building a sustainable program versus getting high in the transfer portal, right? There's 2 different games that's being played in 2022. And I understand Coach Johnson's playing that sustainable game, that build this program out game. At some point you do have to really hit that transfer portal. He's been able to get Dawson and Jameson, and he's trying that and he's getting there, but I get what he's doing. He wants to start something with guys that he brought in as freshmen to really build something special. And in my opinion, it seems like he's doing that. It seems like the guys are completely bought in, right? He's a players coach, in my opinion, and players coaches are super important in 2022, right? Those are the ones that understand like how to motivate guys. That's why you see a lot of the great coaches retiring, because it's tough motivating guys in 2022 and this new day and age of the student athlete. And so I just feel like he's the right guy for the job. He has guys bought in. He has guys competing. There's obviously things they can improve on the basketball court, but they're missing 2 guys from the beginning of the season. Now they're missing 2 other guys that are part of rotation. They're missing about 4 or 5 guys that expected to be in the rotation. They're throwing in guys that they didn't expect to play. And, it sucks at times, but at the end of the day, you want to get punched in the mouth like this, as a coach, because your players are going to now only get stronger from it. And so I think that's good. That's a good outlook that, Coach Johnson can have from this team. Guys like Pharrell Payne, Joshua Joseph, Braden, Carrington, Jaden Henley, like these dudes are having to compete against Zach Edey, a damn giant, like going to Purdue, one thing, is one of the toughest places to play in the country. It's intimidating as hell already. And now you're going to these guys like that. Just seeing that is only going to help them next year. It's only going to help them and the new recruits that are coming in. And when I look at these 2 new recruits, like I've heard nothing but good stuff about Cam Christie. I heard he's a lot like Max's brother, but quite honestly, to keep it, simple, a dog, right? Someone who just is just nasty on the court, doesn't care. Dennis Evans just seems like he's someone that's super down to earth, doesn't need anything fancy, right? I talk about that 2022 student athlete. Like Dennis Evans he's not the norm, right? He's that old school type of player that you need. He's an athletic freak. He has a high upside. Like you're coming back with all these injuries. In my opinion, long-winded, that's all the stuff I look at. If I was in like the AD position, we're in a fine place. It sucks that we're in this position, but you see a lot of coaches in the Big Ten with a lot of higher recruiting classes that are struggling just as much.
Yeah, and what I always tell people is when you compare, I guess, new coaches that took over programs at the same time as Ben Johnson, a lot of those guys had previous head coaching experience. And while I personally believe Coach Johnson has shown why you should be excited for the future of the program, it wasn't going to happen overnight because he has to develop as a coach just as the players have to develop under him. And I think there's just plenty of evidence that you should be excited for the future, just the level of players that he's bringing in, the style of play that they're playing. And if you're watching every single game, I mean, me personally, at the start of the year, there were a few games that it was tough to take some positives from. But really, since the calendar switched to 2023, they've been competing at a much better level. On Saturday against Northwestern, it wasn't great, but there's just a lot more positives, I think, since they've ramped up Big Ten play. And I mean, like you mentioned, it's 4 guys that he expected to be heavily in his rotation when he built the roster in late spring, early summer. And yeah, it's not like NBA. You can't make a trade at the deadline. You're dealt the hand you're given, and they just don't have the personnel to compete in the Big Ten right now. And I don't think any coach with the guys they have and the injuries that they've had would be able to consistently compete in the deepest conference in the country. So I Gophers fans are interesting. Historically, Minnesota basketball is interesting because it's a program that's had success, but they've only been to one Final Four that isn't hanging up in the banners. So sometimes people, I think, need to just temper their expectations and have patience, like you said. But I think Coach Johnson is doing a fine job, and people just need to realize that it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it only hurts the program, like always calling for the coach's job.
Yeah.
Recruits never like to see that. Recruits see the fan bases, how they act, and also calling for the coach's job. Like, we don't want to keep going through coaches. Like, who was it? Munson before, I think. Tubby, like, I don't care how bad he was. Like, it probably would have helped if he could have stayed a little bit longer just to grow something, maybe he wasn't the right guy. Tubby Smith probably could have stayed a little bit longer to grow. Like, it's one of those things where it's even hard as an alumni base to be able to connect with guys, is we've all had about 5, 6, 7 different coaches, right? There's not really any type of identity built in the program, and that hurts recruiting. How can you go out and say, hey, I'm going to be here for a long time, when kids and coaches and players and AU coaches and parents aren't dumb? They know that Minnesota's a coaching hotbed. They know coaches go there and might be gone in 4 or 5 or 6 years. Like, it's tough. So we can't just be calling for those guys. We need to be able to build a culture. We need to be able to utilize marketing strategies like Duke and the Brotherhood, and you have Coach Krzyzewski. Obviously, we're not comparing anyone to Coach Krzyzewski, but you have a coach that's there that's withstood, tough seasons, and maybe some losing seasons, but they figure it out and they build something special. If there's a reason to fire a coach, if there's just flat out terrible performance, yeah, sure, but if you look at a Tubby Smith, there's absolutely no reason that he should have been fired. And I think that really changed the trajectory of our program over the last decade.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair opinion to have. And when you look across the conference at school recently, right now, Rutgers with Steve Peichel, he was a guy who struggled his first few years, and they stuck to him. And now he's one of the best coaches in the conference, and they're one of the better teams in the conference. And if you look at programs that are comparable to Minnesota historically, when they do things like that, where they have patience with a coach, that's when you can have long-term success. And I think that's just what fans need to realize. And I guess you can only hope that the level-headed fans realize that. But the ones you see on Twitter are always going to say what they say, I guess. But last question I'll get you out here on. Now that you're a fan of the team, since you graduated, I guess, have you had a favorite player that you've watched with the Gophers, or even favorite player that you played with?
Ooh, that's tough. That's tough. I mean, I'll say
Maybe a Mount Rushmore. Give me like your top 4, top 5.
okay. I could go with that. I mean, I would say Andre Hollins. I told you he's just a close friend of mine. Battled and practiced a lot. He started, obviously, he's, one of the greatest players ever played, one of the, all-time leading scorers. And so I loved battling him every day, and I respected how hard he went every time he stepped in between those lines. And just what he did from a 3-point just scoring perspective. And when I used to see Williams Arena just erupt, it was a lot of times when he would just pull up and just cash. And so, one of the better shooters and players I've been around, and just a great teammate. I would say Rodney Williams. I probably the most athletic, highest flyer I've ever played with. I saw him step into a gym with flip-flops on and go between the legs. I knew he wasn't normal. Not even stretching. It's insane. And when I talk about, again, just the arena going crazy, some of his dunks, right? I think most Gopher fans remember were just unbelievable. And just, I feel like over the last 10 years, we haven't seen anything like that.
Yeah.
We haven't seen anything like when Rodney or Trevor would dunk and just would erupt the place, right? Trevor would just yell just to yell, but we haven't seen anything like that. But I would say, Rodney, Dre, and I try to think about a couple players maybe from recent teams. Nate Mason, I'm going to say Nate Mason because Nate Mason was a freshman when I was a senior. And Nate came in, no fear.
Yeah.
I wasn't really sure I would be, right? He seemed younger, seemed smaller. I was like, he's a scorer. What is he? What kind of kid just hoops? Kid can score, can pass, whatever you need to do. And we played Louisville, his freshman year, my junior year in the Armed Forces Classic, Pitino versus Pitino, and Dre Hounds and Dre Matthew both were in foul trouble. So Nate Mason had to step up as a freshman against Chris Jones, Terry Rozier, Montrezl Harrell, and he didn't back down. And I was like, kid's a dog. He can go. And that's what happened. 4 years. I mean, he was killing it for the Gophers. And so I'd say those 3. And the 4th one it's tough. I would say that's my favorite ones. Probably either a mix between Amir or Earl Turu. Just because Daniel, I was really close to Daniel, a Hoops and Christ kid for us, saw him develop and just saw that he went above and beyond everything anyone thought he would be in college. Being able to get to the league is huge as a Gopher, respect, for real.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the same with Amir. I think the coolest thing about Amir is he's been a consummate professional since I saw him step foot on campus, a lot like how I think Coach Pitino would describe Austin Hollins, with just that consummate professional. And so, I mean, I loved Amir, everything he did, and seeing what he's doing in the NBA, he just gets it, he's disciplined. And so I love his game. But yeah, man, I mean, I'm a real fan now. I'm a real fan. I grew up a Mizzou fan in St. Louis, but Now I'm a real Gopher fan, and I'm bought into this. I got a lot of blood, sweat, and tears now at this point.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And I guess best of luck the rest of the way.
Appreciate you, Tony. No, best of luck with you as well, and keep these coming.